things that my mom made my dad promise that I would do. And so I then went back and got a couple more degrees for him and me. And, I've been teaching for 15 years, the last 5 at Haralson County High School. I work with students with disabilities in their career technical and agricultural education classes. I help them with job placement, so if any of y'all are hiring, I got some kids that need work. But I enjoy my job. And, when I saw these numbers earlier, I was actually shocked they're lower because there's so many kids out there that bounce around from home to home. And I coached football for 10 years, and I've seen some pretty sad situations. Kids that come from hard households. And then you're so right, a lot of them do. It's amazing how forgiving a child will be for a parent who is addicted to drugs or comes from a bad situation. But as a coach, I've kind of been a foster parent to a certain extent by setting an example for those kids. And nothing near the people around me up here and on this panel have done, but there's a great need in our community. And I encourage you to fulfill some of those needs. This morning, my son was crying because when I left, I was going to miss his Thanksgiving lunch at school today. And that's the first one that I've ever missed. And so I had to sit him down and talk to him. I told him, I said, son, you ever noticed at school there's some kids that don't have moms and dads that come and eat with them? He said, yes, sir. I just told him, I said, Daddy's trying to fix that. And I'll come by tomorrow and we'll eat together. That's all right. I said, but we've got to get some more moms and dads with these kids. And he may not understand it today, but he'll get it one day. And I just want to thank y'all for having me here today.
I'll take the first question because I can answer it. It's cool. This question was for DFACS. Is adoption through DFACS only offered for children 9 and older? And the answer to the question is absolutely not. Caleb came into care, how old was he when we got 2 days? He was 2 days old, so he went into care at 2 days. He stayed with the Beans for 16 months. Then he came and stayed with us for another 16 months until finalization took place. So no, if you've heard stories about infants and these people that were adopted early on, then yes, that is an option. Okay. Okay, for those who maybe really might couldn't hear that, there is a waiting list for those that are 0 to 5. So just to keep that in mind. All right, Ms. Purdue, I'll let you go first.
Okay, this question was directed to me, and it says, what is the best way to reach out to our community to generate awareness and a positive connection for foster care? Well, what I like to tell people is whoever are your friends or your circle of influence, and everybody has those, talk about it. Bring the subject up. Find out what people think about when they hear the word foster care. And you be the one to find out the true facts and help dispel that negative image that so many people have in our communities. So the best way to do it is just to bring it up in casual conversation with people you meet. When we were fostering the infants and I would go to the grocery store, I'd have this little infant with me. Well, all of the infants that we kept were either biracial babies or little African American babies. So here's this white lady with a little black baby, and they would say, oh, is that your grandchild? And I said, no, this is a foster baby. And I would begin to talk to the people in the grocery store who stopped me and tell them about the need in our county, in our community, for children in foster care. So talk about it. Don't be afraid to bring up the subject. Ask people what their perception of foster care is, and then set the record straight.
Okay. All right. right, Ms. Hendricks, I'll let you take one and then we'll pass it around.
The question was, if Carroll County has 123 children in custody and there are only 11 foster families, where are the remaining children housed or kept while they wait for a family? Well, some instances they're sent to in other counties, all over the state of Georgia. And if we can't find a waiting foster family, then it depends on the age of the kids. Some of them are put into care at group homes. If you're talking about youth villages, the place in Bremen, Kids Peace, they're placed there. That's not our first option, but because they have to be housed somewhere, we put them where their needs are going to be most met until they can go back home with their family, or we can find an available foster family. So that's when we need more foster families who don't have to go to these group homes or institutionalized or outside the county.
What are your thoughts about being a foster parent when you have young children in your home, like your own biological children? Is it hard for young children to understand why there are other kids coming in and out of the home? That's a great question. Our youngest daughter, Ellie, has never known a life that didn't include people coming in and out of her home. Just a quick story. When Caleb left, Ellie and Caleb, because they were little, we bathed them together, just in the bathtub, you know, they're toddlers. And she cried the first week he was gone. So she knew he was, when we gave her a bath, she cried. She knew that he wasn't there. And so from her, I guess her first thoughts of life have always included that. Our older children understand it, and they support it, and they like it. I think that the little ones, though, somewhere they understand it. Our youngest son was 3, almost 4 when we began to foster parent, and he even then knew that these kids were different, that they came in and that they needed things, and he's always been a good one to love and share, and the older ones have always loved and shared, but the little ones, I think that they do understand. I don't think it's damaging or something that's going to be hard on them, as long as we're there to support them and let them know their thoughts. Yeah, that's what I think.
All right, this one's for Brent. How old were you and how did you find out that you were adopted?
That's mine. All right. I kind of always knew. I just didn't know exactly what it was. It was more of a culture thing. Like when I grew up, I remember I had this bookshelf in my room, and I remember of all the books, there was this one book. It was called Why Was I Adopted? I think it was. It was a real popular book back in the 80s, and I really liked the characters in it. That's what drew me to it. And then as I got older, I kind of figured out the message. And it wasn't something that we brought up like, you know, if you don't clean your room, you're going to go back to your biological parents. There wasn't any of that. I had to usually initiate the conversation. Otherwise, we went through life together. And it was just, you know, and I have a great bond with my dad. I had a great bond with my mother. And so, well, like I said, it was just one of those things that, you know, my dad said that when I was little, I would actually tell people, because I was only one of the few people that we hung around that was adopted, that I would tell people that I thought, you know, because I thought that was like a special power or something, you know, that was something cool. But I know for a lot of people that didn't always turn out like that. Sometimes there's some resentment, and that's a very delicate thing. I know some people want to shelter that from them. They're afraid they may lose them, or they may be angry. They're scared of how they react, so it's easier just not bring it up. But my parents, they let me know from day one, and then they put it to the side, and they said, all right, let's go through life together, and as we go, you know, we'll address it as we go.
I like the idea of having special powers because you're adopted. That is awesome. The question was asked in the themes of how do the younger children kind of react. We have a 13-year-old and now 10-year-old, and it's been very interesting to watch them go through the process of experiencing what it means to have someone come in your home and stay, and be your little brother, your annoying little brother. The oldest is, our daughter Sydney is 13, and so she's like, Dad, this is totally not fair. Now there are 2 younger brothers that I got to keep up with. The next one that we get in this house has to be a girl. She had no idea that that would mean 3 girls. So we never know how that process is going to work itself out. So Ms. Hendricks, I know that you have another question if you want to.
Well, I'm gonna field this to Ms. Morris as soon
Okay.
as I ask it. Okay. How can we get involved with organizations who give events or babysit during events for foster parents?
If anyone's interested in volunteering or you want to know how to get involved, you can contact me. I'm looking for anyone that wants to support my families in any kind of way. They've mentioned it several times today that if we just surround our foster parents, that they'll be able to take care of our children. So I will be available this afternoon if you have more, you want more information on how you can support them. I'm open to any suggestions and I'll help you put it together. Anything I can do for my families, I'm willing to do it. So I'll make sure you get my contact information before we leave.
All right, Ms. Hendricks, I'll let you take another.
No problem. And what are the qualifications to become a foster family? I'm not sure of the qualifications. I can say, once again, to Ms. Morris, she can answer that question.
All right. Should have put Letitia on the panel.
All right, basically to become a foster or adoptive parent, what you'll need to do is to show your first or initial interest in contacting the agency or contacting me. Once you've done that, I will invite you to our orientation session. Our orientation session is about an hour to an hour and a half long. We talk about the criteria, what's required, what you will have to do to become a foster parent, and then once that's completed, we will then have your criminal background checks done. If you pass your criminal background checks and everything is fine on those screenings, we will then invite you to our 23-hour impact class. Now, the class is not 23 hours all at one time, of course. We generally have classes over a span of a month and a half, about 5 to 6 weeks, for 2 hours, 2 times a week. During that time, we go over all of the policy requirements. We talk about the different ins and outs, the different things the kids have experienced, what you can look forward to with these children when they come to your home. We really try to prepare you for what's going on. I came from Child Protective Services, so I actually used to remove children from the home, so I feel like it's my responsibility to prepare you for what you're about to get involved in. I don't want to paint a pretty picture for you. I don't want you to think that all of these children are going to come and just be happy because you have a lovely home. I want you to really know what you're getting yourself into when you become a foster parent. That way you don't run screaming the first time you have a child that misbehaves. Because like someone said earlier, these children are not coming from loving homes. They're not coming from homes where they're going to be normal and they're going to be well behaved. Some of them do, but not all of them. So I want you to be prepared to care for them. Once we're done with the class and you've been certified, you will receive a certification stating that you have completed the 23 hours. Once those hours are done, we will begin the home study process. Now that's where it takes a little bit longer to complete because we have to write a home study. And there's like a packet of information. It's a literal book. I have one of my recent certification people here. She just completed the class. And that book is very thick and she's still working on it. And it takes a while. And then after it takes you a while to complete that paperwork, I then have to take it and write a 12 to 15 page paper about you, your upbringing, how you were raised, how you feel about different things, how you're going to take care of children, your life experiences, and how you would use your experiences to parent a child who's been traumatized. Once that's been completed and turned into the county director, then it goes through the approval process, and then they're going to go through, make sure I've done everything I need to do. Everything is done. You have to have a criminal background. You have to have medical exams, drug screens. We have to have character references. We have to come to your home. We even have to have your pet inoculation record. So if you don't have your pets, if you have pets in your home, we have to have their shot records as well. We have to check everybody out. And then there's people that may be living in your home. We need to know about them. We need to know the people that will be around our children. Because our children have been traumatized, we want to make sure they're not going to be around someone else who is going to further traumatize them. And even though we all have great family members and great friends, we also know we have some of those family members and some of those friends that we wouldn't want to leave our cat with. So we have to make sure we're going to check out everyone and that our kids are going to be safe when they're in your home. And then once the county director signs off and gives their approval, believe me, we will be calling you the same day, asking if you could take placement for the children that we have. Because generally, once I have a home that's approved and I announce it to the office, usually there's a placement the same day. I had a lady last summer, and every week she would call me, what's the status of my homesteading? What's the status of my homesteading? Well, I called her and said, well, guess what? You're approved, and we've got 4 kids that are waiting. And she took those 4 kids the same day. And we've had to we make sure we put in support for her, because we didn't want her to just be out there alone and think we just dropped them off and we ran screaming. No. We want to be there to support you guys. We want to make sure that the placement lasts. We want to make sure the children are going to be safe and that you're supported. Because if you're not supported, you know, that's the likelihood. Can you imagine 4 kids at one time, and she has 2 of her own? So we wanted to make sure she was well supported on that day when she took those kids, and we're there checking on her every month and making sure she has what she needs. So the process takes a little while, but it is worth it, and it is definitely needed in our community.
All right, now I want you to think for just a minute. One of these 2 things. Either the craziest thing you've ever been asked, or the best story that you can tell about foster and adoption. So let you ponder that. The craziest thing is, I don't know if everybody was back in and saw the video, we may show that going out. It's stuff that people say to foster parents. I think every one of them that was in there is asked. My favorite one is we were in impact training. I think we had about 5 or 6 families, and I'm not going to reveal the person's name, but the question was asked, what if I get a fire starter? And every time we have a question, the same person would ask, but yeah, what happens if I get a fire starter? What am I supposed to do? And the story is full circle, and they have a little girl, and every time I see his face on Facebook, I wonder, does he have a fire starter? So she's not a fire starter, but anyway, those are the kind of things we think about. So does anybody have a story or a funny question that you would like to share? No, that's it. Okay, Steve, I was like, come on, something's got it.
As Melissa mentioned, we have some older kids in our house. Our oldest son is 18, and our daughter just turned 20. And so when we're out together as a family and we have a new young one, there are assumptions that people will make sometimes about our oldest son and our oldest daughter and the little child that's with us. And so we get a lot of interesting questions like, is this your child, or are you your grandparents, right? And so I don't know if it's the wildest story we've ever had, but it's interesting, particularly in the blended society that we've become, as people try to, as they struggle, I think genuinely to be accepting and acknowledging of your situation, but not quite knowing exactly what the correct mix is there, is important for us as foster parents to kind of see the humor in that and support it and encourage it, and not make folks feel uncomfortable. And then we have those stories that we can kind of tell around the dinner table as time goes on as well.
Well, one story is, of course, I get, you always get questions, but the question that at least my students enjoy the most was, have you ever met your biological parents? And of course, they can't wrap their mind around pre-technology, okay? When you wrote letters to people, all right? And if you called, sometimes there'd be a sound that would let you know they're on the phone, they cannot talk, busy signal, things like that. So, once I convinced them that I'm not lying about these days, they enjoy them, just how I did come to get to meet my biological parents. And at the time, my father was the head football coach at Little Rica High School. This was in 1998, and which was evidently a busy year for me and Miss Purdue in 1998, but it was a good year. But one day I was at the house. I guess I was 19 years old, 20 years old, and I remember my dad called the house, and I answered, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, what do I need to be doing?" And he said, "Come up here to the field house." I said, "Okay." I said, "What's going on?" And he hangs up. And I'm thinking, okay, what have I done? All right. So I get in the car and I drive up there, and my my palms are sweaty, and I'm trying to think, and he asked me to do something, and I ignored him, I didn't know what it was. So I go in the field house, and he's sitting there, and he says, sit down. I said, okay. And he tosses an envelope to me. And I opened it up, and in this envelope, I was like, what is this? He said, read it. And it was a letter. Of course, emails, starting to come around. And what it was my biological mother had reached out to the lawyer who did all the paperwork for me. And it was this big 3-page letter just talking about her wanting to get in touch with the baby boy. She didn't know my name. But she did know that I was the only boy born in the hospital that day. And so she was just giving a big long story about who she was, and she was real successful, and she was a senior in high school when she had me, and she had dreams of being a model, and just at that time, the home life in her mind wasn't, fit for me, and, she wanted me to have a chance at life, but she just wants to know that I'm doing okay. And so I read it, and my heart's just racing, because I'm excited, but at the same time, I'm a Vohan, and I don't want to be disrespectful to my dad and make him think for 1 second that he's not good enough, or that he wasn't enough for me. And so I looked at him and said, what do you think? He said, what do you think? Something you want to do? I said, are you okay with it? He said, if it's what you want to do, we'll do it. But in retrospect, he's a very confident man. And he knows our relationship. So that night, he said, but before we talk to her, I want to talk to her. I said, okay. And my dad was a big health nut. He always walked everywhere. And so that night he comes home, and he goes for a walk, and he goes up to what's called a payphone. Okay? And that's where you pay to communicate with people via a telephone that had cable on it and all that stuff. And so he walked up to Brookside Covered, a little gas station, a mile and a half from our house, and he called her from the payphone. And when he came back home, I said, well, what all did you say? And he told me a little bit about it. And so he said that when he called her, he asked to speak for her. My biological stepfather answered the phone and asked her, he was like, who's this? He told him, he said, oh, I need to speak to Dawn. So he gets Dawn on the phone. And basically he lets her know who he is, and that he's going to lay down some groundwork, some rules that she's going to need to abide by. And if she doesn't, he's going to hang up the phone. And if during their conversation that he feels like she's trying to get information about the boy, then he'll hang up and she'll never hear from him again. And so they talked for a few minutes, and he said, I'm going to call you back at this time tomorrow night. And this went on for over a week. He'd go for his walk. He called at 7 o'clock. Usually by the second ring, she was on the phone. And so they got to know one another. And she asked him one time, she said, do you think the boy would want to talk to me one day? And he said, yeah, I think Brent would. And it got quiet. And she started crying. And he's like, what's wrong? She said, I've waited my whole life to know what his name is. And so he said, let me continue to talk to him. And again, every time he comes home, it's like you're waiting for your favorite TV show to come on, You see him, I'm sitting by the window, he walks up, he's telling me about her life. And he said, I think it's okay. And I asked him many years later, I said, why did you do that? And he said, you're mine, and I have to take care of you. And I'm not just going to let someone who may have a drug habit or an addiction or looking for someone, because Brandon, you're 20, 21, you're either in college, you have a job. He said, I'm going to make sure that this is someone coming into your life that's going to help you, not try to take advantage of you. And so on Mother's Day, 1998, my dad called her from the house. And she answered the phone by the second ring. and asked if, she was like, is this Frank? I was like, it is. I said, well, did you talk to Brent? Do you think he'd want to talk to me? And he said, oh no, why don't you ask him? And handed me the phone. And I said, hello. And it was just silence, And once we finally got her under control, we talked for an hour, but it seemed like 5 minutes. And we've had a good friendship ever since then. My mom has passed away. I'm still thankful that I have time with my dad. But Dawn is a good friend to have in my life. And but she'll never be able to replace, like you said, being there, fulfilling that need day after day after day. It doesn't draw much applause, but it's those little things that add up, that build that foundation that's irreplaceable, absolutely irreplaceable. Sorry, went a little long on that.
Anyone? Poignant story, funny story, challenge, anybody?
I'll give a funny story. My mother was a foster parent when we grew up in Alabama. And so it was already 6 of us, well 7 of us in my family. And we got my sister when she was about 6 months old. And when we went out in public and people found out, she started a program through our church. And so we were out one day and somebody was asking her about, fostering, if you already have 6 kids and a stay-at-home mom, how do you do it? And, why would you want somebody else? You already got 6 of your own. And her response is what made me laugh, because she wasn't rude. She literally was like, after you have 4, you don't even notice the other 3. She was like, so it's no different. Like her yelling and screaming meant nothing to the other 6 or 7 that was in the house at the time, so it didn't matter. And the lady looked at her, and she just looked like the stone cold. Are you serious? And she was like, yeah, I'm very serious. And we had other kids, that came in through our home as well, but Keisha was the one that stayed. And she's 18 now, and even when she went back with her mother, we still had that relationship. Dinner, Thanksgiving, we still talk, play with them. They still, live with us. But it was her reaction that made me say, for the rest of my life, I'm gonna do something to help somebody else out. Because it was just hilarious. Like, have you seen my kids? And this noise, this is nothing. And we kept taking kids in, so that's all I know. All I know is other kids, and our family is huge. So people, when we were younger, we didn't know any different. So you come in, you leave, you come back, we see you. That was just how we did it, and that's how it's always been done with us.
Great answer. All right, Mr. Purdue, do you have a